Hello, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Around the Octagon. Today, I'm joined by San and Luke. We're here to talk about UFC Kansas City, get into the fighting nerds a little bit. Pretty decent card we have coming up. Luke, San, let's get into it. So to start up this main card, we have Ikram Aliskerov facing off against Andre Muniz. San, I'll let you kick off with this one. You think Ikram can get a nice rebound fight, following up that fight against Robert Whitaker where he got brutally knocked out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously tough to go over the fact that he got starched by Rob Whitaker. It was not his best performance. But let's not let that, make us forget what type of fighter he is. He's very solid. He's got a good background. I mean, he was obviously, a very good prospect in the UFC. If, he's jumping up and fighting Rob Whitaker, that kind of early into his UFC career. And this to me just looks like a classic rebound fight. I think he's just going to get in there, beat the brakes off him. Obviously, the line supporting him a little bit high in my opinion, but that's probably what will end up happening. So yeah, I got Aliskerov here, taking that nice, easy rebound win, and hopefully get him back fighting up in the rankings.
Yeah, Son, I'm right there with you. Mostly because I just don't like Muniz. I think I didn't bet him. I bet Paul Craig in that fight, but I thought that it would be entertaining. And correct me if I'm wrong, he got knocked out by Paul Craig. Is that true?
Yep.
That's kind of speaking levels. And just like you hit on, like Ikram's seen, he got a couple wins against lower competition, then took that big jump. Robert Whitaker's no slouch, former champ. He got beat up in that fight, but at the same time, I think you hit it on the head. Bounce back fight, and I'm taking Ikram by knockout here. I think he gets it done within the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, another thing we have to take into consideration here is like the kind of terms that Ikram Aliskerov took that fight on against Robert Whitaker. Ikram was in the States when Khamzat had to pull out, and then Ikram filled in and flew all the way to like Saudi Arabia. I believe that's where those fights were. So you're not expecting to go in and fight, especially against the championship caliber of Robert Whitaker, flying across the country, such a huge step up. So I'm not really nervous about Ikram's loss. I'm more so nervous about how he can rebound because that was a pretty tough knockout. He took that early in that fight. And the last time he got knocked out like that was against Khamzat Chimaev back in Brave before the UFC. So it's been over 5 years. So against UFC competition, I'm curious to see how he bounces back. But I'm with Luke on this one, and I'm going Ikram by knockout as well. I think Muniz can be a little bit chinny, and he's only getting older. Moving on to the next fight, we have another fun one. We have a bout between Randy Brown and Nicolas Dalby. Nicolas Dalby, he's tough, man, but Randy Brown's skilled. He's a good striker. Dalby, he's just getting up there in age. Luke, you can kick this one off. Are you going with Randy Rude Boy Brown, or could you see Dalby keeping this one close and pulling off the upset win here?
Yeah, Zach, I know we were talking about this one, before we got kicked off here. This is a tough one. Dalby, just like you mentioned, he's tough as nails. I could be incorrect. I don't think he's ever been finished in his UFC career, and he's 40 years old. But at the end of the day, he is 40 years old. I think this fight has a clear path to victory for Randy Brown. He's got the reach advantage. I think he's 3.5-inch reach advantage. If he keeps the distance, that guy can throw. I could see it, him keeping the distance, fighting this a smart fight. And getting in the win column after this fight. I think it goes to decision. I don't think Dalby gets finished here, but I am taking Randy Brown. I do think the odds are good here. On UFC website, I think it's around -200 Randy Brown, so I'm all over that.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with you guys. I think Randy Brown had a rough last decision against Brian Battle. It was a split decision. I know I bet on Brian Battle that fight, and I was pretty anxious to see the results of that. Very tight, it could have gone both ways. Obviously, it did in one judge's scorecard. But I think Dana's kind of fed up with the refs recently, and maybe that was part of it. And I think this is kind of a reward for him. Obviously, no easy walk in the park. Obviously, it's a very it's still a tough fight. Dalby, like you guys said, is kind of a little powerhouse. You can take a lot of punches, but I see this as a nice setup, kind of bounce back fight from that Brian Battle fight, and I think Randy Brown takes it.
One thing I will say about like getting back in terms of like the judges' scorecards is I think Nicolas Dalby potentially won his last fight against Renat Fakhretdinov, Renat Fakhretdinov's been on a tear, and Nicolas Dalby went out there and he made that very competitive. That was a split. He got knocked down in the first by Fakhretdinov, so I think that was a 10-8. but he won rounds 2 and 3, arguably 10-8, round 3. I actually thought Dalby won that fight, and I was rooting for Fakhretdinov. And then the fight before that, he beat Gabriel Bonfim, and I think the Bonfim brothers' names kind of weigh a little bit more than how good they are, in my opinion. But still, that's a good win, regardless. So, Nicolas Dalby's tough, and Luke, you were correct. He's never been finished in his UFC career, but Randy Brown is 5 inches taller. You touched on the reach, Luke. He has longer legs. I think you'll be able to touch him up from the outside. I don't really see I could see Dalby making this a close fight. I think Dalby probably wins round 3, but I think rounds 1 and 2 will end up going to Randy Brown, and I'm going Randy Brown decision.
Yeah, I mean, also let's mention, the competition that Randy Brown did lose his last 2 fights. You obviously have Brian Battle. That was a super close fight. Then you have Jack Della Maddalena, who's also just a dog. And then who else did he lose to? It's slipping my mind, but just 3 very. Who was that?
Luque was his last fight.
Vicente Luque. So exactly, just kind of cream of the crop guys skill wise. So it's tough to kind of put Dalby up there in those rankings to kind of take another loss to him. I just think it's all signs point to Randy Brown here.
Yeah, and Brian Battle did miss weight in their last fight too by like a lot. I think it was like 4 or 5 pounds, or 4, 5, 6 pounds. I think it was like something up there. So it's fighting a heavier guy, but who did that hurt more? Who really knows? Like, it's kind of an age-old argument. But moving on to the middleweight bout, we have what should be a very exciting matchup with Michel Pereira versus Abus Magomedov. Michel Pereira is coming in at around a -140 favorite. Abus Magomedov, we've seen his game. He's pretty well rounded. He can wrestle. His kickboxing's pretty solid. Michel Pereira is just like shot out of a cannon. Who knows what you're gonna get? San, I'll let you hit this one first. Are you going with Michel Pereira or Abus Magomedov?
Well, I do love watching the Michel Pereira fights. I mean, he's usually pretty exciting. He's a very show fighter almost, a guy that you're gonna tune in the fight because it's gonna be exciting. Whether he gets a crazy win or he just does a backflip into a kick. You never know what you're gonna get from this guy. But I do think Abus Magomedov is not a guy that you can really just be a show fighter against. He obviously is, a decently proven fighter. He only lost to Caio and Sean Strickland in the Caio Borralho and Sean Strickland in the UFC. And then obviously the Sean Strickland fight's what set him up, to go and get that belt. But still, taking Caio to decision is a feat. I mean, he's a hell of a fighter, hell of a specimen of a human. That dude's just tank. And I just think Abu has more paths to victory in this fight. Michel Pereira, obviously going to be very exciting just to see him go out there, but I don't know if the caliber of fighter that he is up there, to challenge these guys that are kind of rough-nosed guys that are just going to go out there and bang and do whatever they need to do to get a win. So I'm taking Magomedov here.
Yes, I'm with you here. This is really fun fight. Looking forward to watching this one. I think with Michel Pereira, I think he was on an 8-fight win streak before he ran into Fluffy Hernandez, which if you listened before, I'm a huge fan of Fluffy. Dude's a stud, and I think 10 out of 10 times he loses that fight to Fluffy, he's just kind of a level above. But yeah, Boost has been in there with great competition. The Sean Strickland fight was great. He actually really laid it on him in the first. We know Sean Strickland's fighting style. He's like, I'll give me everything you got, and then I'll finish you when he does finish fights. And that kind of was that. I think this fight in particular, it's going to be weird because I don't think either guy gets it done in the first. But after the first, we've both seen these guys kind of gas out. So I do think this fight really comes down to who really has the tank, gas left in the tank when it gets to the second round, when it gets to the third round, if it gets there. And like you said, I think a Boost with his style, he'll be able to have a little bit more. And I think he's learned a lot from that Strickland fight where he gassed out. And like you said, Pereira, his fighting style, the crazy attacks, if he catches someone, it's great, but that wears more on your body than, a standard kickboxer, a guy like Magomedov. So I have Magomedov here. I think it goes by decision. And I think it's really just, we're watching the last 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of the third of a low level, guys gassed out, you just throwing crazy punches. And I think Abus gets his hand raised at the end of 3.
Yeah, I have to agree with you guys, even though like I don't know if I fully want to. Like, I think this should be a complete toss-up. Michel Pereira is a slight favorite. I'm a little bit like, about. But he has beaten some solid fighters. He had the split win against Santiago Ponzinibbio, who is solid. The TKO over Petrosky, solid. Submitted Michal Olazechek, solid. Ihor Potiera, I'm not going to call him solid. I mean, it seems like a little bit of a regression from those other guys. But still, that's 3 solid wins. Abus Magomedov, that fight with Sean Strickland was just like, come on, man. Bruno Ferreira, that's a solid win. He looked pretty good against Bruno Ferreira. But like you touched on, Luke, both guys have gassed out. But in Michel Pereira's fight against Fluffy Hernandez, that was a 5-rounder, and Fluffy Hernandez puts a crazy pace on people that I don't think Abus Magomedov will be able to replicate. Like, Fluffy's just like a big Marab. That's probably the comparison to make.
Yeah.
So Michel Pereira, I don't know. He's tough, and he does land some crazy shit. Like, I could see, because Abus is kind of like a very like orthodox kickboxer, where you kind of know how he's going to throw, and Michel Pereira is crazy. So I don't know if some of those entries might throw him off, where Abus is more like bread and butter, get it done. But I think the wrestling of Abus will play a factor here. I think it'll at least win him 1 round. So just the wrestling ability makes me want to lean Abus Magomedov. So I'm gonna agree with you guys.
Yeah, and to note, I know, I took Abus, but Pereira did, he clocked Fluffy in the early part of that fight. Obviously, Fluffy was able to recover and get the dub. But just like you said, anything could happen when Michel Pereira walks in that octagon, man. Must-watch guy at this point in his UFC career. Not really in the conversations to really hop into contention, but a guy you tune in for every fight.
Yeah, I think this is a fight where I'm betting on Abus, but silently cheering for Michel, because if he wins that fight, it's going to be in some crazy fashion. It's going to be posted all over ESPN MMA and all other pages on the internet. So I'm hoping for a highlight, but I think I can't, in my right mind, pick him.
Yeah, I like that point you made, Luke, where he's like almost must watch, even though he's like not. I mean, he doesn't have like a ton of Instagram followers, but he's not like a big name or like championship caliber. But when I see him opening up a pay-per-view, I'm like, oh, I want to watch this. It's going to be a fun fight. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
definitely.
Moving on to the next fight, we have a bout between Giga Chikadze versus David Onama. Onama is a slight favorite here at -175, which I would lean to agree with that myself. Luke, I'll let you touch on this one first. Are you going with Giga or David Onama?
Yeah, this was another tough one. I think the UFC has been doing a good job putting together these fight night main events with, a lot of close fights, which sometimes we're not always blessed with. There is some fights in these cards that are, very one-sided in terms of the odds, but Onama, he's got the win streak going right now. I think he's won 3 in a row, 3 in a row since that loss to Nate Landwehr, which was a crazy fight. I mean, I don't know if that won fight of the night. Yeah, it did. And that was a crazy fight, and that kind of put Nate Landwehr on the map. Obviously, we've kind of seen a regression as the opponents have gotten better, but he went on a 3-fight win streak, and I think he has that momentum riding in here. But in terms of Giga, man, I mean, you just look at his opponents, look at his resume. I do think that plays a factor when you start getting up into the higher ranked guys, especially in this division. I think his last fight, he lost to Arnold Allen, and he won against Caracas, and then he lost to Calvin Kattar, which that was fight of the night as well. I think they both went the distance. Yeah, he lost unanimous decision. And those are reputable opponents at this weight class. And I think Onama, I'm a fan of Onama. I like the way he fights. I think this is just a step up in competition that, I don't think he could overcome here. I'm on Giga here. You said he's the underdog. I think that's a good value play. I don't think he gets him out of there, but I am taking Giga here by decision.
Yeah, 100%, Luke. I agree there. I think Onama, just looking at his past and the competition he's had, I think this is a big jump for him, especially with Giga Chikadze. Especially, when you look at his losses recently, they've been decision against really good fighters. I mean, you talk about Calvin Kattar, just a crazy good striker, crazy good fighter in general, and he brought it to decision. And then I see a guy like Onama losing to Nate Landwehr, which he is a sick fighter. Like I think like as a fighter, that's a guy that, you're always going to cheer for just because he's a cool guy. He's some crazy dude from Louisiana. But, let's be honest here. He came from, a Russian, some random Russian fighting league, which props to them. I mean, I'm sure there's some tough shit in there, but I don't know. Just bringing Onama to decision there and getting the win. I think it kind of set the ceiling a little bit lower that expectations were with Onama. And I think Giga Chikadze is one of those guys that just with experience and, with the battle scars he has against the guys that he has, I think he's just learned more and he just knows more to be able to pull out the win. I don't think it's going to be some crazy, finish, but, I'm kind of hoping for a Chikadze KO here. I know he can get it done. He's gotten it done before. But yeah, I think it's just going to be a little bit too big of a jump in competition. And I don't think right now, at least in his career, Onama's ready to take on what Chikadze is going to say, especially when they're, height and length wise, they're pretty similar. I think fights like these usually come down to experience, and that's what I'm going to go with here. So Chikadze.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I did not think that David Onama would be a ranked featherweight back in 2022, but I think he's going to be come next week because I am going with David Onama here. I think Onama has more paths to victory, and by that I mean he's the better wrestler in this. Giga Chikadze's grappling game is just not really there. Onama can mix it up fairly well. I think he can get his grappling involved, and he's a pretty solid striker too. I know Giga Chikadze is known for his kickboxing and whatnot, but Onama is no slouch in the striking department. I think he'll be able to mix up his game, and I'm going to take him by decision. I don't see him finding a finish over Giga Chikadze, but I don't see Giga really finding a finish over Onama either. I think the knockout potential is there with Giga. We've seen that plenty in the past, but he hasn't found a knockout since 2021. It's been almost 5 years, and he's now 36. So he hasn't found a knockout since he was 31, and he's now 36, and he's fighting someone who's young and has a chin, has never been knocked out. So I don't know if I would pick the 36-year-old to knock out the younger prospect of a fighter with a chin. So I don't know. I don't really see it happening. I see Onama just having more control time. I see him outstriking Giga and winning a 29-28 type of decision. Had to mix it up a little bit, Moving on to light heavyweight, we have the retirement fight for Anthony Lionheart Smith fighting Mingyang Zhang, the big fella from China. So this is one hell of a retirement fight for Anthony Smith. Like, damn, bro, you got to fight Zhang Mingyang, who's an absolute tank of a person who's had, I don't even know how many straight, like, round one knockout finishes. San, I'll let you start this one off. Can you see Lionheart pulling off the upset? Maybe, Zhang Mingyang shoots a takedown for some reason and he locks up a guillotine or something?
I don't know, man. I don't think so at all. I think Zhang Mingyang's pretty pissed about the tariffs. He's going to take it out on the American Anthony Smith. That's a joke, but I do see him knocking him out. I mean, if there's a guy in that, obviously I think we can all agree on paper, Anthony Smith's like the best fighter ever, but he really hasn't been in the past few years. Been knocked out a few times, a lot of losses in decision. Obviously, he's a really good fighter still. He's a guy that's, been constantly in and out of the rankings, in his career. He's a guy that's been in the UFC for a while. Obviously, experience is there. But Mingyang's on a tear. I think he's on a 2 KO win streak. And he's just been going crazy. He's just a big dude too. It's tough to bet against him when, Anthony's going to be out there looking at, I hate to say it, but, as sloppy as he usually looks out there. So I'm taking Mingyang by knockout here in the first or second round. I think it happens. I think, obviously it's a bigger step in competition than he's been dealt with recently. But he's just been tearing through those guys. So I think he's ready for it. And if there's a guy in that decision, in that division that you can, as a prospect, kind of hope to knock out, it's going to be Anthony Smith. And I think he gets him out of there pretty early.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think this is kind of, a blemish on the UFC matchmakers. I don't know why they would schedule this fight, especially as a retirement fight for Anthony Smith, who is, one of their guys. I mean, he's on the table a lot of fights. He's had the podcast with Bisping. I don't think he does anymore. But a guy that's potentially going to be around the UFC for a while, and as you kind of hit on, he's kind of faltered in his last couple fights. He looked good. Who did he beat? Vitor something. He beat. Yeah, that was a good fight, and we were like, oh, maybe he's back. Maybe he has a little bit of a last leg run here. That quickly went away. He lost to Dolidze. Dolidze popped up a weight class, and then lost to Roundtree before he beat Petrino, and then Reyes after, both by knockout. It seems to be his kryptonite as he gets older is fighting guys who can knock you out. Obviously, Anthony Smith, great jiu-jitsu, great submission artist. You would expect him to get a fight that catered to that in terms of his retirement fight, and the UFC was just like, no, we're going to give you arguably the number one prospect with knockout power in this weight class, a guy right outside the rankings. So I'm all over Mingyang here. Just like you said, I think he gets it done in the first or second. And I'm worried for Anthony Smith. I mean, if you've followed UFC, the last 5 years, you've seen a lot of Anthony Smith. He used to be, fighting for belts, lost to John Jones. It just kind of sucks to see him go out this way. And I hope he doesn't get knocked out because I don't want it to falter him. I mean, if you guys remember the Reyes fight, he was like yelling at Reyes, like, you're attacking my family. So maybe a little bit of that, getting knocked out is affecting him. And to ride off in the sunset, probably knocked out again here, just doesn't seem like the UFC's, paying him any respect here. But like you said, I mean, there is a world that he catches him in something on the ground and does, land a submission here. I think those odds are very, very low. But yeah, it just sucks to see Anthony Smith, get this fight for his retirement fight. Wish him nothing but the best, but I'm not picking him here. I got Mingyang by knockout.
Oh, I'm going to hell for laughing there, man, because it's not funny getting hit in the head.
I mean, yeah, and he went through that with the guy broke into his house. That sucks, but that was definitely a odd thing to see, his fight against Reyes.
Yeah, and just Zhang Mingyang has like serious power. I mean, he knocked out both. It was Brenson Ribeiro and Ozzy Diaz, so it wasn't like he fought complete scrubs in his first two fights. Like, it wasn't like he was fighting two guys that were winless in the UFC. Both guys have picked up wins in the UFC that he knocked out, and he just throws with so much intention on everything. Like, he's throwing to hurt you, and Anthony Smith is just there to be hit. One thing I will say is, it's not like Anthony Smith gets knocked out cold. Like, he usually gets TKO'd where he does his little like ball up on the ground and puts his head down and kind of just shells up, and then the ref comes in and it's like, all right. So I don't know if he'll get like flatlined, but I see him getting knocked down round one, round two, and getting ground and pounded to a finish. That's really how I see it going. But I will say, Zhang Mingyang, looking through his fight log right now, he has been subbed twice in his career, one of which was by guillotine, but that was his first career fight, so you can't really take that into account. The other one went by rear naked, so maybe if something crazy scramble happens, maybe Anthony Smith could potentially lock something up. Like, if he's gonna win, you might as well take him to win by sub, because he's not gonna outstrike Zhang Mingyang, and it's not gonna knock him out. Maybe he could outpoint him, but I think Zhang Mingyang is a pretty safe play here, and I'm taking him by knockout.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. Just retirements in general in the UFC, that I feel like most of the time, a lot of fighters, obviously just being a fighter and kind of the mentality you have as a fighter, you never really want to, hang the gloves up ever. But the last time I did see like a good retirement fight was like the Cub Swanson retirement fight, which was awesome. He walked off with a knockout, in the first few seconds, but you really don't see that. And that's why that fight was so much of a spectacle, was because he could pull that off. But it sucks, seeing those retirement fights, because that's usually how it goes. You see him kind of just, get, a way of saying, but just stretch it out of there. Hopefully not, but it's just kind of how it goes.
It's a little weird too, because I don't think like Anthony Smith is that big of a win on Zhang Mingyang's record. Like, I don't think people are gonna be like, oh, he beat Anthony Smith. But I guess Anthony Smith is the ranked 15th fighter, so it's a way to get him into the rankings. But I don't think it really holds that much stake beating up Anthony Smith. I think they could have done better with this matchup here, even to get more hype behind Mingyang. But it is what it is.
Yeah, and Son, just to go off your point, yeah, like the Robbie Lawler, Nico Price retirement fight, that was a
Yeah.
good matchup for Robbie Lawler. Well, in talks, nothing confirmed yet, but hearing rumbles in Louisiana, Dustin Poirier, another guy who never won the belt. I think he holds a higher respect right now in the UFC than Anthony Smith may. But that's like Max Holloway, a guy he's already beaten twice, up a weight class for Max. That's a good retirement fight if DP goes out, win or lose in that aspect. It just seems like a disservice. I mean, normally the UFC is pretty good with their guys, getting them, out of there, retire at a high note, send them right to the desk. It just seems weird for the UFC. I feel like something happened behind the scenes to make this one, schedule this fight.
And it's not like it's a guy like Tony Ferguson who was just kind of lingering around and he didn't know which one was going to be the last one, so you were giving him solid competition. Like, this is known to be Anthony Smith's retirement fight. Like, he's not sticking around after this. It's not like he's just lingering. Like, he's going after this fight. So yeah, I think they could have done a better job for their guy there. It's not like Tony's situation. That was much different.
Yeah.
But moving on to the main event of this card, we have Ian Machado Garry as the slight favorite, opposing the fighting nerd Carlos Prates. This is a sick main event on a fight night. I'm pumped up. We get to watch this for free, and I'm excited for Saturday. Luke, I'll let you start this one off. Are you going with Machado Garry or Prates?
Yeah, this is I know we kind of touched on in the last pod with the Volk fight and the Diego Lopez, like kind of would be happy to see either of these guys win. I think that falls in that category for me. If you listen to previous pods over, I don't know how long we've been doing this, a year and a half, 2 years. I haven't always been the biggest Ian Machado Garry fan. I took him to lose to Shavkat. I thought Shavkat would get him out of there. It's very rare, I feel like, in a loss where you gain so much more. Obviously, everyone who steps in the octagon in any aspect, a pro, amateur, ultimate respect for. But so much respect gained in that loss to Shavkat for me with Ian Garry. I mean, he was down in the scorecards, had that late sub attempt, had Shavkat in an area that we have never seen him in, at least in his UFC career. And I think opened the door up for, I don't know who's end up going to fight for the title at that weight class, but areas that Shavkat can be beat at, I think Ian Garry exposed. And then on the other side, you got Prates. We'll get into it after this. One of the most entertaining fighters on the roster, part of the Fighting Nerds, has the most hype, arguably out of any of the Fighting Nerds right now. Electric guy to watch. I think, 5 knockouts in a row, and beating good competition. But I just think Ian Garry right now, it's so hard. He's so well organized in his attack. We saw in the Venom Page fight. Clearly thought Venom Page was the better striker. What did Ian Garry do? Took him down, weathered that storm, was able to get out of there with his hand raised. I think we're going to see a fight like that, and I hate to say this, I don't think it's going to be as entertaining as maybe a casual fan would like, but I think Ian Garry is just going to find a way to get his hand raised at the end of this fight, and it sucks to say because I want Prates to keep on winning, and I want the Fighting Nerds to still be at the hype, keep that 0 in the loss column. I think Ian Garry I think he has the ability and he's good enough on the feet to not get hit. Like, he didn't really get hit against Michael Venom Page, who we know is one of the best strikers in MMA in the last 10 years. So I'm going Garry here by decision. I will say, I do think this is another huge disservice by the UFC, man. You really have two guys at this weight class that are on the absolute hype train, both of them, even though probably way more in Prates' favor, where I think this would be a good fight maybe in a year or two to be a title fight. And I don't think that eliminates it, win or loss here for either guys. And I think, they're both kind of taking on short notice, but Gary's the one stepping in here. This is a good one, man. I mean, this is a good one. I wish it was 2 years later for a belt. I think it's going to be entertaining in the fact that just the build up to this fight, it makes you tune in for a fight night. I think the fight may be boring if I predict right and Garry comes out with the victory. But I'm excited. I'm excited to watch this one. And I think Garry has more to lose. I think it really could, if Prates wins this, propeller to the top. Garry loses this, what do we do with Ian Garry? I think the reverse isn't true. If Garry wins this, kind of still at the same spot, and Prates, you lose a fight, you get a chance to get back in there and, start that streak again. But I'll shut up. I got Ian Garry here by decision. Son, talked a little bit before. I'm excited to see your perspective on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to your last point, I definitely agree. I think Ian Garry has a lot, I guess, less to win in this situation. Carlos obviously is coming up, and his last fight fell off, and obviously that was called off, and then they had to call it Garry in. So he's definitely got, as a replacement fighter, this in his position. I think this is as good as you can get, and this is probably the best possible fight that he could get and fighter to step in, other than, just the champion going out there and being like, yeah, sure. But obviously that's not going to happen. But, I have been seeing, reports online kind of, going back to your point of, why would, they match this up. And I don't know how true it is or not, but from what I've been seeing, it seemed like the call with Hunter, the matchmaker from UFC, and Ian Garry was they kind of said, hey, like, do you want to step in? There's a fight. And they didn't even tell Ian Garry who the fighter was. And he was like, yeah, sure. Hung up the phone. Whether that's true or not, I think it came from pretty reliable sources. But, if that is true, you got to think, if you're Ian Garry, you're like, hey, yeah, sure, I'll take whatever fight, kind of like a badass, put your phone down. I think the last name on that top 15 that you want to hear is, oh, you're fighting Carlos Prates. That's kind of a situation where it's like, ooh, shit. Like anybody else on this fucking division, I would have taken short notice, no matter what it is. But Carlos is a guy that, it's not only just him. Obviously, he's a spectacular fighter, great striker, kind of has it all. Grappling, I guess, is up for debate. We haven't really got into that yet and haven't really been able to see that. But that just goes to show how good his striking is. Not only is he just a crazy athlete, crazy fighter, he's got an insane team behind him. They have, literal data analysts on the team seeing, the mathematics, kind of like a Bryson DeChambeauing UFC, kind of really getting into the numbers, seeing, putting that correlation together of, where do the numbers come into fighting? They don't call them the fighting nerds for nothing. Everybody on that team is just crazy smart, very intelligent fighters. And, with that said, I am taking Carlos here. I do think he has enough to get it done. And not only that, I think, Ian Garry, like I said, kind of, took it on short notice and kind of said, yeah, sure, whatever. Carlos is preparing for the worst with the fight that he was supposed to have. And he, he has had a camp. He's been training, especially with the Fighting Nerds gym. You're training that long with that caliber of a gym. Obviously, you're going to keep getting better. He's probably in there every day. And then getting into camp and being prepared. And then, Ian Garry just, on a whim being like, yeah, sure, I'll fight this guy, not even knowing who it is. I think, almost psychologically, it's like a roadblock. If you're Ian Garry, you hit in there like, oh, yeah, so who am I fighting? Oh, you're fighting Carlos Prates. It's like, fuck. That is probably one of the best prepared fighters and the best prepared gyms in the UFC. You can't say enough about the Fighting Nerds. They're just like crazy good. Pablo Sucupira is just a crazy good fucking coach. It's just very, very tough. I went against Jen Silva last week. But I think I'm done with that. I can't go against the Fighting Nerds. That gym is just insanely good. They won the gym of the year for a reason. And I think Carlos takes this. He's fully prepared. Ian is not so much. And I think he's enough. He's got enough to do it.
I think Ian Garry is definitely a tougher matchup than Jeff Neal for Prates. So Prates does have a tougher matchup now than what he originally would have had. And to the point, I did hear that story about Garry hanging up the phone, but he had to have known who he was fighting. Like, you got to know, Prates matchup with Jeff Neal just fell through, and they're calling you right there, short notice. Like, he had to have known. He's like, it's Prates. I'm hanging this bitch up. I'm gonna make it sound like I'm just a fucking badass, and I'm a little
bit of aura farming there from.
Yeah, I mean, he's corny. I can
yeah. Like he knew who it was, but here's where Garry scares me in this fight, and it's that in the fact that, like, while his striking is so sound, It's that he fights off his back foot, and he's a counter striker. And I don't know, and he likes to fight at range. And Carlos Prates also likes to fight at range. So that's where I'm like, oh, fuck. And like, who has the power to put the other one away? Prates has the power to put away Garry.
Yeah.
And if we're going to sit here at range, I don't like that for Ian Garry. But Ian Garry is very damn smart. Let's not act like he's a dumb fighter by any means, and I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm not going to insult Ian Garry here. You know, if I wanted to insult him, I'd say other things. But Garry, he's very smart. Like, you saw how he fought Michael Venom Page, like you mentioned, Luke. I think he's going to come in here with a game plan, even though it's on short notice. I think his team's smart. They're very methodical. Although taking a fight on a couple weeks' notice against Carlos Prates is not very methodical, but in fighting aspects, very methodical. And he's fought 5-round fights before. We did it in the UFC, I believe. Yes, that fight with Shavkat was a 5-round co-main. Yep, where he won round 5. So you know he has the gas tank. I don't know if Carlos Prates has the gas tank. He's never been past like 2 rounds in the UFC. So if this does, like if Garry is able to weather the storm, is Prates the chain smoking drinker gonna be holding up in rounds 3, 4, 5?
Hell fucking yeah, he is.
You know, it's a damn good question. The guy smokes a pack of cigs a day. When round 5 comes around, like, I don't see him winning that, or round 4 for that matter. And I could see Garry bringing in the wrestling and just winning a decision. He's fought in the better of the competition between the two. Carlos Prates' best win is against, are we going to say Neil Magny or Li Jingliang? I don't know.
Magny.
Yeah, who I know.
That Liang fight was just crazy, though. He just tore him.
He put him asleep. But Garry, you know, he's beaten Michael Venom Page. That fight with Shavkat was close. He beat Jeff Neal. And then obviously, you know, technically it was a decision against Neil Magny, but Neil Magny couldn't even move after he fought Ian Garry. He's kind of leg kicked him into oblivion and just picked him apart. So you might as well call that a finish for what it really matters. So he's just been in there with the better fighters, and he's fought in a 5-round fight. I trust Ian Garry by decision more, but I don't know who I want to win. I mean, I'm picking Garry, but Prates is so much cooler than Ian Garry, if we're going to be honest.
100%. Yeah. I think it's one of those where it's like, if you could bet it in pieces, like bet per round, it's like Carlos wins the first 2 easily, and then that's where the decision starts to come in. Like, oh, if it gets later in the rounds. But we said this. We said this with Diego Lopez too. Like, oh, we haven't seen Diego Lopez go into the championship rounds, and not that he won those championship rounds, but he was still coming when we got to that point in the fight. So you never know. I mean, these guys are professionals. I think he's gonna be ready. Yeah, the smoking weed or the smoking cigarettes does pose like, oh, that's probably not good for your lungs. But, you know, that's the reason O'Malley's going to beat Merab in the second fight, because he stopped smoking weed. He'll last longer. But
yeah, if that fight happened, I saw O'Malley was on crutches or something. I don't know what the deal is there.
Yeah, that was weird.
So we'll see what happens there. But official pick, I'm going Ian Garry. So, Son, I got a question for you. Given that you're the only one here that has Carlos Prates, you're kind of the only one this question is applicable to. So if Prates wins this fight, who is going to be the first fighting nerd to lose in the UFC out of those 4, the main 4?
Gosh, I mean, I think if Carlos wins this weekend, he's got to fight after this. That it's kind of not a buffer fight, because obviously he's getting really deep in the rankings at that point. But I think his biggest risk to losing is right now, just because we don't know who and what type of fighter he is when you start getting him against those highly skilled and highly ranked fighters. So, you know, if he survives this weekend, I think he's got another fight that he wins. What does kind of scare me, you know, who does lose, not who does lose, but who has the biggest, I think, threat after this weekend is Caio Borralho. I think that, you know, especially with that Khamzat fight that's been brewing this whole week, you know, we've been seeing a lot of shots going around. Obviously, Imavov doesn't want to fight him. I think if Caio, you know, gets that Khamzat fight, I think that's super dangerous. I mean, you if anybody saw, you know, the Rob Whittaker, you know, fight picks, you know, I thought Rob Whittaker was going to win, but Khamzat literally tore his jaw off. So, you know, it's just crazy what that guy can do. It's crazy how strong that guy is at that weight. It's almost like a superhuman fighter there. You know, he's just crazy strong. Obviously, you know, he knocked his teeth out of his jaw, which is just ridiculous. So I think, you know, if Carlos can survive this weekend, which I think he will, I think the first one that has, you know, the biggest threat to losing is probably Caio. And that's just because John Silva and Rufy do have, you know, a lot more fighters to go through before they get deep in those rankings. I think they'll definitely have 2 fights that they can win comfortably at least, you know, with both of them. And I think Carlos and Caio are just, you know, getting to the point in the rankings and the fighters that they're fighting that they're going to start running into some real obstacles in their way. Me personally, I think, you know, I don't think Caio loses that fight, but, you know, that's for another podcast. But, you know, I think the danger is definitely there. And I think especially if that Khamzat fight happens, I think, you know, I think that's definitely the biggest threat to the Fighting Nerds' perfect record right now.
Yeah, so I guess what I was going to ask next is kind of one of the same, but yeah, I agree with what you said with Caio being the biggest threat to lose after Prates. I have Prates losing this next fight, so that's kind of that. And then I would actually favor Khamzat to beat Caio as well, but I think that'd be a very, very fun fight to watch, and I hope that fight gets made if Dricus is unable to fight for that belt, and I hope they make that interim. But the next point I was going to get into is which one do you think catches the belt next, if there's multiple of them? And I guess that answer is kind of there if you think Caio wins, because that would likely be for an interim if he is fighting Khamzat Chimaev. So, Luke, I'll let you get into that one a little bit. Who would you favor in that matchup between Caio and Khamzat Chimaev?
Yeah, I think I agree with on the Caio. I think has the hardest path in terms of keeping the 0 out of all the guys. I would favor Khamzat. I feel like at this point, and the just listening to Khamzat talk and how he's been preparing recently since really the missed weight, it just seems like another level. It seems like a guy who has came to terms with, like, you only get a 5-year window, and that window is now for him. For a guy who, you know, has the restrictions and can't always fight in every area, so kind of limited to the fights that he can get. I think really he's unbeatable at this point for all the guys under him. I think the DDP fight poses some problems for him, but I do think he runs through everyone below him. In terms of just going, you know, tangenting off of that, who I do think has the best chance to hold the belt the quickest, I think it's Prates if he gets this done, man. I mean, just a stylistic matchup. Nothing against Caio, but the fans want to see knockouts. That's just the nature of the sport. Yeah, you could be a good sub guy and you could get up there like an Oliveira, but at the end of the day, knockouts are king. And if Prates knocks out Ian Garry, I mean, we got the Della Maddalena and you have Shavkat waiting to fight for the belt. And Sean Brady's actually number 1, but let's say Sean Brady versus Prates next, title eliminator. I think in 2 fights we could see Prates fighting for a belt. And the same could be said for Caio. I think Prates has that intangible. Not that Caio doesn't. He's great all around. But Prates, when you knock guys out, people watch the fights. People want to see you fight for the belt. It scares the champions when you get knocked out. We just saw it with Ilya and Volk. There's that aspect, man. If he gets this done against Garry, man, I think he really could beat the rest of the guys in the division and go fight for a belt here. I think he's that good. But I also think Ian Garry's that good. So if he gets it done on Saturday, he would be my next in line to hold up that belt.
I'm going to go a different direction from you. I think the next in line is Gene Silva. I think Gene Silva has because here's how I kind of view it going down with the Fighting Nerds coming up. I think that Caio Barajo would lose in that fight to Khamzat Chimaev. That'll set him back. He'll have to win another 1 or 2 before he gets a title shot. And then I think Carlos Prates loses here to Ian Machado Garry. If he wins, then yeah, he'll have that title eliminator. But I see them both losing their next matchups. And I don't know if there's really anyone in the featherweight division that I'm taking to beat Gene Silva as of right now, maybe outside of Diego Lopez and potentially Movsar Evloev. I think if you were to fight for the belt next Saturday against Alexander Volkanovski, I think Gene Silva would finish Volk. I think he'd find a shot on Volk over the course of 5 rounds. I think he's just such a precise striker, and he has that power that, like, Volk's his chin's gone. I mean, he even got knocked down in that Diego Lopez fight. And while I think Diego Lopez is probably the better all-around fighter opposed to Gene Silva, just that power of Silva. I think he'd find his shot at some point over 25 minutes. But he's still one fight away from getting that title shot as well. Like, he's not too far behind Carlos Prates, and his level of activity is wild. Like, he's already had, what is it, like 5 fights since he fought in the Contender Series in September of 2023. So like he fights a ton, and realistically, like, he's probably one fight away from getting that title shot. After Ilia Topuria submitted Bryce Mitchell, he just fought one more fight against Josh Emmett, got the title shot. So they could set up Gene Silva with one more matchup, and then potentially he could be getting that shot. And I think he's just so damn dangerous, where I do think he would beat Volk in a 5-round fight. And I think Volk's going to beat Movsar Evloev in that fight. I think he'll retain his belt. And then you could see Gene Silva just pick up one win there and potentially get a shot at Volk, which I could see him winning.
Yeah, I mean, you also, I mean, you talk about the featherweight division. I mean, that's one of the divisions that probably gets the most movement out of all of them. There's a lot of guys going up, a lot of guys going down. I mean, just looking at the rankings right now above Jean Silva, you know, you got Josh Emmett. I think Silva runs through him. You got Sterling, who hasn't fought in a while. Lerone Murphy, you know, guys that I just don't see Silva losing to. Obviously, you know, you start getting closer to that champion spot. You start getting a lot tougher fights. You know, you got Max Holloway, you got Diego Lopez, you got Evloev, even Rodriguez. But those are all fights that, you know, I think until you get to, you know, basically Yair Rodriguez, I think, you know, Josh Emmett, Sterling, Murphy, Ortega, Arnold Allen, they can all get kind of, you know, jumped by Silva, especially, you know, subbing Bryce Mitchell, who was a very good submission guy. You know, he's a very good grappler. You know, that's obviously he's got the knockouts. You know, he's got all the finishes, and then you go and get a sub on a guy that's known for being really good at grappling. You know, he's kind of very much building his case here that, you know, you know, there's a big even debate online now. You know, does he fight for against Volk next? You know, what's next? And I mean, and this is kind of the point where it gets to, you know, the rankings. How much do they matter? I mean, I don't think anybody would be pissed or upset or you know, questioning if Jean Silva got the next title shot. As crazy as it sounds, you know, at 11, you know, he's proved himself, and I think the gym as a whole, backing you, and you guys being the, you know, him and the other 3 guys being, you know, kind of the front runners of that gym, it holds a lot of weight for any guy.
And another thing to touch on with that last fight as well too is, like, Bryce Mitchell did take down Ilia Topuria and kind of held him for a little bit, and he didn't even come close to taking down Gene Silva. Mm-hmm. And when he went for that takedown in the second round, he got put in that ninja choke, subbed. Gene Silva just showed how well-rounded his game is, and that he can hold up in that grappling department as well, even though he didn't get taken down and put in any dangerous positions, but he showed he was able to stay out of them, given you knew what Bryce Mitchell wanted to do, and he did stay out of it. So he's just so damn well-rounded, but I don't know which one of these guys is the best, because then you have Mauricio Rufy sitting around who they say is more talented than all of them, and given the brief amount of time we've got to see him in the octagon this far, he very well might be. So, Luke, I'll let you start this one. Out of these 4 guys, which one do you think is the best, or has the highest ceiling, and will have the best UFC career?
I don't know the ages of everyone. I think that would play a huge factor. I'm very contradictory in this podcast. I do think it's Prates again. I mean, just that aspect, man. They all have knockout power, and I love Rufy too. I think Rufy down the line, obviously, I think he's still young enough. He's just not in the rankings right now, so it's kind of hard for a stacked lightweight division. Like, does
I got
Rufy
the ages
beat
for you,
Islam?
Luke, if you want them.
Yeah, read them off.
Rufy and Silva are both 28. Caio is 32, and Prates 31. So Silva, Rufy 28, Prates 31, Caio 32.
Yeah. Oof, it's tough. I mean, they're not like, they're still in their primes, fighting kind of around 30 prime. We see guys really hit their stride in terms of overall fighter, you know, prime well-roundedness. I think Caio is kind of at the disadvantage. Obviously, he's kind of like the pioneer for the whole Fighting Nerd group. So I don't, and with the Khamzat fight and DDP, like, those are really, really tough opponents for his fighting style. I still think I would go Prates. I think that division has enough potential for him to, if he were to get that belt, he could hold it. With that being said, like Rufi too, like Rufi's a great fighter. Gene Silva, you're kind of having a turnover in that division with Ilya going up. Max is getting old. Volk's old. I'm still gonna go Prates here, man. I think he has. Obviously, we haven't seen his grappling. I think he has the ability to get the belt and be, a very popular champion. And obviously, popularity trumps all. If you're a popular guy, you see it with, you see it with the Sean O'Malley's. Like, you don't always need to be the best guy and most in line for the title to fight for titles. But at the same time, I think Gene Silva has. You guys touched on it a lot. Like, he has the potential to rule that weight class just because of the turnover. Yeah, so I'll go those two as my top. I like, is Islam ever going to give up lightweight belt? Like, who's going to be Islam? So it's hard to say. Rufini's so far out right now. So yeah, those are my two. What about you, Son?
I'm pretty split between Rufi and Caio right now. I think John Silva, all four of these guys, when you think about them, I don't think any of them, it's too crazy to say that all four of them can hold the belt at any moment. I think all four of them, especially obviously with the gym, I think they all have the capacity, and I think it's likely that all four of them will hold the belt at any time. But we think about, when you say who's going to have the best career, who's going to have, maybe the longest championship ranking, who is maybe the best, actually of getting it done and holding on to the belt for that long. I think it's Caio. And I steer away from Jean Silva, not because I don't think he'll hold the belt. I think he's, very likely to hold that belt. But I think the turnover in that weight class is what's going to push him to lose that belt eventually. Just there's so many guys going in and out of the flyweight division. Obviously, Diego Lopez is out there too, who's a guy that I absolutely think is going to win the belt at some point.
That division has been held down, though, by champs in the past. Like, Max held it down, Volk held it down, Aldo held it down, Connor never did. But, like, it has been held down in the past. But those guys are all legends.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I mean, you're not wrong. But, I think that when you just keep getting matched up with guys that are just up and coming and are just, chasing for that belt. And I think that's just in general a division that gets a lot of movement. I think that, that kind of takes Silva out of the probability of, having the best career. And then now you look at Caio and his that middleweight division, there's not a crazy amount of movement in that division. You don't see, too many. Obviously, you see it all kind of depends on how, active the champion is. But in the middleweight division, I mean, those guys that have been in the top 10 have been in the top 10 for a few years. Adesanya has been there for I don't know how long. And then you get guys, obviously DDP's in there, and then you get, Sean Strickland, who's been in the rankings forever. I just think if Caio can get that belt, I think he's a guy that is so well-rounded. Obviously, with the striking, he's really good. But not only that, but with the grappling, the fighting nerds may claim that Rufi is the best fighter. Maybe, skills-wise, maybe he's got the highest ceiling in grappling, striking, and all that together. But I also think his weight division is another one that, gets a decent amount of movement. If I see a guy like Caio who's fighting maybe once, twice a year, and being able to hold on to that belt for 2-3 years, I think that, kind of just trumps him above the other guys. And not to say that he's just an absolute dog too. I mean, he's crazy good. Like you guys said, he's kind of the pioneer of the whole, fighting nerds movement and what kind of brought the rest of the guys on. And that just goes to show how good he is. And he's super well-rounded, obviously backed by a very good team. Great striker, great grappler. And that's almost kind of, something we see with Bilal and how he's holding it down. He's not some spectacular, like guy to watch fight, but he's a really good fighter. And, with the great skills that he has, he's able to kind of hold on to that belt and push off a lot of those challengers that you would think would beat him, but don't. And I think Caio is just a little bit of a step above that. Yeah, no, because he's going to be fighting DDP. Sorry, but DDP too, another guy that kind of just holds it down. With pretty, nothing spectacular, but he does hold it down. Then you get a guy like Kaio up in that championship spot. I think he's going to be able to defend a lot of up and coming fighters and whoever may challenge him for that belt. So I think Kaio ends up having the best maybe career record out of all of them, and very deservingly so.
Yeah, for me, Kyle was the one I eliminated first, actually, when I was looking at him, because he's 32 years old, and I don't see him beating either DDP or Khamzat Chimaev, and both of those guys are younger than him, so I don't think either of them are going to expire to allow him to then grab the title. Khamzat is 2 years younger than him, and if Khamzat becomes champ, like, get in line, because that guy fights once a year, and by the time Kaio can win a couple fights to get another crack at him, he's going to be like 35. So it's like, ugh. And then DDP is a year younger than him as well. So I think it's tough for Kaio, although I think he's the best right now. I don't know if I see it happening. And then Mauricio Rufy, I think, has like the biggest ceiling as far as superstar power goes. Just like the way he just has that kind of like aura to him where like when he walks out, I'm like, this guy's fucking sick. And his style's crazy. It's very fan friendly. A spinning back kick knockout is just nuts. And he just has that swagger to him where I'm like, wow, like this guy has the biggest potential as far as superstar power goes. He has that it factor, but that division's so stacked. And even though he's just 28, you just added Ilia Topuria into that division as well. So that's a young, tough fight. You have Paddy Pimblett, who's a young, tough fighter in there too. Pimblett's tough. So I think that's a tough weight class to get the belt in. But if you are the lightweight champion of the world, you're by definition a massive superstar. They always are. They all are. If you look at the past ones, you have Islam, who's a massive superstar, Habib, massive superstar, Conor McGregor, massive superstar, Charles Oliveira, massive. Like whoever is the champ of that division is top of the UFC as far as like numbers go and everything. So I just tough for him to get the belt, in my opinion. So I'd probably lean between Silva and Prates. I think highest ceiling goes to Rufy. Who do I think will have the best career? I'm leaning Gene Silva. Best right now, Kyle Barajo. And then Prates, he's right there. Like I could see him also grabbing the belt, like Luke mentioned, and maybe it is him at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm going to go Silva for the best career.
I mean, lucky for us as viewers and maybe supporters of, that whole gym as a whole, they're all in pretty different weight classes, and we get to, it'd be crazy to see all four of them hold the belt at the same time. And as crazy as it is to say, I can totally see it happening too. I can see all four of them reigning, and they're just all so good. I mean, so lucky for us, I guess, as viewers, we get to see those guys, put on a show for us pretty much every time they come on Saturday. So, regardless of who it is, I don't think anybody's too mad about watching those guys fight.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, one note on the Kaio argument, I kind of agree with you, son. Like if he does get through Chimaev and let's say DDP or DDP and then has to defend the belt against Chimaev, however it lays out, he will be in line to have the best career just because he's had it up to this point. And then you already beat the two guys that really, in my eyes, pose the most, maybe the only threat to him in that division. Like obviously I love Fluffy Hernandez. That could be down the line, but like I think he beats probably everyone else in the top 15 other than, those guys are maybe Fluffy pretty handily, like the way he fights now. And like then he's what, 10-0 with the belt, defending it, win 5 more fights. You're at the point where you're like in GOAT talks for that division. Obviously we still have Izzy, but and also one thing I want to touch on, like if like this is a huge fight, we haven't seen a gym like have this much respect probably ever, but I think the closest relatively is like City Kickboxing when all those guys were Dan Hooker was right there when he fought DP, and then obviously Izzy and then Volk and Kai Car France. Like we haven't seen a gym with this much magnitude in the UFC, and they're way more likable than the City Kickboxing. Like you'll have guys who hate City Kickboxing just because of they fight for City Kickboxing. So I think a lot of weight lands on Prate's shoulders this weekend. I think if he wins, that Gene Silva Volk fight is way more makeable now because they have that much, leverage and the Kyle Kamzat fight, like if he loses, you could say, oh, like the gym has lost a little bit of energy and not giving those fights. I know that's not a good way to think about it. Everyone is an individual, but I do think like it holds some weight practice here for the whole gang.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I agree. That's a cool
I
point
mean,
you made.
Kyo's career is definitely very largely, and if it happens at all, I mean, I think my prediction weighs pretty heavily on the Hamzat fight. If it does happen, and if he does get that win, I think that's just not smooth sailing, but a lot easier waters than what he's facing right now.
100%.
But yeah, no, I think, I mean, when those four guys are training together all the time, and their head coach Pablo Sucupira, he's just unreal. You watch that guy in interviews, you watch him, kind of talk about what forms a gym and what makes a gym what it is, and how everybody's so good, and kind of the numbers that he puts behind it. It's crazy, because I don't think many, if at all, any people have kind of broken down the fight game as he has. And that kind of is an overarching umbrella for all the other fighters that are under him. But yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's about all I have on my end. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add, but for anyone listening, a like or a sub would be appreciated. And yeah, we'll catch you in probably next week. There's a pretty fun fight night. We have Corey Sandhagen, that matchup, and then you also have RDR versus Bo Nichols. So we'll probably get in touch some point next week, and yeah, have another one come out then.